Shout out to Craig J for sending me this story. And this is coming out of St. Louis. And this, if I had to categorize this, I would put it under the not so surprising in any form file. So in this picture, you see a man by the name of Luther Hall. And as you can see by his picture, he has a swollen lip, some bruises on his elbow. And that's because this guy was beaten. But it's who he was beaten by and the result, and who he is. This guy is actually a detective, so he is a cop. But he was beaten badly by some palm-colored cops, and they said that he was beaten like Rodney King. And I wonder if they put that there because maybe that was a quote one of the palm-colored cops said to him as they were beating him. But the reason why I said this is not so surprising is because one, of him being beat by them, and two, the result. Do you want to know what the result was? There was a trial. And every last one of those palm-colored cops who beat this man got off. Not one of them rendered a guilty verdict, just like Rodney King. The only difference is Rodney King wasn't a detective. Let's see what they're talking about here. A jury on Monday acquitted one white police officer and returned a mixed verdict for two others who were on trial for beating an undercover black detective they purportedly mistook for a protester marching against police violence at an event in 2017 in St. Louis. Now look at that. They're just now getting a not guilty verdict for something that happened 4 years ago. And they beat him at a protest. Now, mind you, these are palm-colored cops beating someone at a protest. Let's take away the fact that this guy is a detective. They actually physically beat someone at a protest. Notably, the jury was all white. No surprise there. Missouri Representative Cori Bush rhetorically wondered in a tweet reacting to the news, and I have my issues with Cori Bush, if an undercover cop can't get justice, how will the rest of us who have been maced, shot, beaten, and brutalized ever get justice? You're going to have to take your own. Jury deliberations were scheduled to resume Monday in the trial of three white police officers charged with beating a handcuffed undercover black detective during a 2017 protest in St. Louis. All three have been charged with depriving Luther Hall of his civil rights under the color of law. The case is testing the so-called blue wall of silence, the unwritten rule of the unwavering solidarity among law enforcement, no matter the stakes, as officers have begun turning on one another. Former officers Dustin Boone and Christopher Myers and current officer Stephen Court have pled not guilty. Myers has an additional charge of destruction of evidence. He is alleged to have destroyed Hall's cell phone. Court has an additional charge of lying to the FBI. Two other former officers, Randy Hayes and Bailey Coletta, previously pled guilty. Back in 2018, Hayes pled guilty to one count of deprivation of rights under the law. He has admitted to beating Hall with a baton and pushing him down to the ground. According to the Associated Press, Coletta pled guilty to making false statements to a grand jury about the assault. A federal prosecutor said text messages between officers ahead of the protest suggested an eagerness for violence against protesters. Hayes testified against his former colleagues, saying Boone kept his knee on Hall's shoulder and Court kicked Hall in the head while he was lying face down on the ground. Hayes was questioned about day after text justifying the assault, during which he claimed Hall had resisted arrest. Now, mind you, like I said, they don't even know this guy's a cop that they're doing this to. And the thing is, I don't think they would care. Hayes insisted that upon subsequent recollection, he was wrong and Hall did not resist arrest. And the thing is, a lot of black people, when they do this stuff to black people, aren't even resisting arrest, but they just do it for the sake of wanting to put their hands on a black man or a black person just because. Hayes insisted, I already read that part, but defense attorneys representing the other officers seized on inconsistencies in Hayes' previous statements and testimony. He is awaiting sentencing and faces up to 10 years. Now, what I'm reading is a prior story. So what I'm doing is giving you backstory, and then I'm gonna bring it up to what's currently, because as we already know, they got off. They are not going to jail. Many other current and former officers also testified during the trial. Azoma on Warmer, and I can't pronounce it. It sounds like a Nigerian name. An FBI agent was a St. Louis police officer in 2017 and witnessed Hall's arrest and assault. He testified he watched Myers beat Hall despite being handcuffed. Sergeant Joseph Marcantano testified he got blood on his hands when he pulled down a neck gaiter around Hall's face. When questioned by the defense, Marcantano said he never reported what he knew to the Internal Affairs Department. Hall posed as a demonstrator during protests after the not guilty verdict of former officer Jason Stockley, who was acquitted of the killing of Anthony Lamar Smith, a 24-year-old black man who died after a questionable traffic stop in 2011. Hall reportedly said he was beaten like Rodney King and sustained injuries requiring multiple surgeries. The city recently reached a settlement with Hall of $5 million. A charge of deprivation of civil rights under the law is a high bar to meet, with many cases ending without federal charges. As explained by the Justice Department, Section 242 of Title 18 makes it a crime for a person acting under color of law to willfully deprive a person of a right or privilege protected by the Constitution or laws of the United States. Under the color of law, it's a phrase that applies to official actors at the federal, state, or local level, including law enforcement. The Department of Justice has declined to prosecute numerous black people killed or beaten by police in recent years. An example of that truth resonating with the people of St. Louis, the DOJ declined to bring charges against Darren Wilson, the police officer in nearby Ferguson who shot and killed the unarmed 18-year-old Michael Brown in 2014. That trend of failing to hold police accountable for their actions has continued nearly unabated. Now, what I'm going to go do is read the more, the more recent one, where it's talking about about this recent verdict. They said a federal jury on Monday delivered a mixed verdict for one current and two former St. Louis police officers accused of beating an undercover officer in 2017, but returned to no guilty verdicts, ending a trial lasting more than 2 weeks. Now, mind you, this is something that happened back in 2017 to reach forward 4 years, and this is what they came back with. I'm not even the least bit surprised. Jurors acquitted Officer Stephen Court and former officer Christopher Myers on a charge of deprivation of civil rights under color of law for the beating of Detective Luther Hall, but were unable to reach a decision on that charge against former officer Dustin Boone. Jurors were also unable to reach a verdict for the charge of destruction of property against Myers, accused of destroying Hall's cell phone. Court was also acquitted of a charge of lying to the FBI. So basically, they treating it as all the stuff that these guys did, as all these pieces of shit did to this guy, just didn't happen. Apparently, he must have beat his own ass. Court's lawyer, John Rogers, said outside the courthouse that he was ecstatic that Court could now return to the St. Louis Police Department if he chooses. Scott Rosenblum, lawyer for Myers, criticized prosecutors from the Civil Rights Division in Washington, as he did during the trial, for the way they handled the case and for basing their claim on rumors from within the department. But the decision left some observers stunned and angry. Heather Taylor, former head of the Ethical Society of Police, watched the trial and said the verdict makes no sense. Taylor said black officers would have been convicted. Hall is black. Boone, Court, Myers, and two other officers have already been pled guilty are white. The jury picked 2 weeks ago was also all white, sparking an unsuccessful objection from prosecutors. Now, you know what's so funny? They'll put an all-white jury there, but then they'll be mad if you make it diverse and say, oh, we got to switch this and we got to switch that and all this, that, and the third. This looks like and plays out like almost like a beat down version of that movie, that To Kill a Mockingbird. It kind of reminds you of that, and how back then, that's how they used to stack the courts. That's how Emmett Till's murderers got off. But one juror was replaced by a black alternate last week. How was it laid out by the U.S. Attorney's Office was perfect, but you cannot get past black and white, Taylor said. U.S. Representative Cori Bush condemned. I already read her tweet. Prosecutors said Boone, Myers, Court, and a fourth officer, Randy Hayes, assaulted Hall on September 17, 2017 at the intersection of 14th and Olive Streets downtown during a night of protests against police violence. They said Myers smashed Hall's cell phone to thwart any resulting investigation, and Court lied to investigators about his presence there and his activities. Hayes and former officer Bailey Coletta had pled guilty. They admitted to lying to the FBI and a grand jury about the incident. Now look at that. They did all of that. They did all of this, including lying to the FBI and all these other higher ups, and they still walked. I don't want to hear anybody telling me that palm color privilege is not real. But of course, they'll continue to lean on that And these are the same ones that keep saying that, you know, the Blue Lives Matter and all that bullshit. And they only say that against black people while turning a blind eye to their own. And that's nothing new. Javed Kazali, one of the attorneys who filed 13 lawsuits representing about 120 people arrested in the police kettle later that night of the Hall's beating, watched almost all of the trial. He said law enforcement put all of their eggs in one basket. The defense seemed to have succeeded in arguing that the prosecution could not prove it was their people who beat Officer Hall. I don't know how the jury could have disregarded the text message admitting that they did it. And that's, yeah, exactly. They texted each other saying that they did it. They actually admitted to actually beating this man. And they found out they were lying, still got off. Admitted they beat him in text messages and still got off. All to be palm colored and privileged in this America in which we stand. Regardless of the verdict, this trial was a success for our clients because many officers said the quiet stuff out loud. They had planned to beat protesters, and it was a mistake to beat an undercover police officer. And the thing is, look, he's an undercover police officer, an undercover detective. They beat him like he was, you know, whatever. And notice that they went and got the black person. Meanwhile, I'm sure this protest is a mixed bag, but they immediately went for the black guy. And even though he was a detective, he still didn't receive justice. He got a $5 million settlement, but that's not justice. I mean, that's personal restitution to him. The city had to pay him. Of course, that came out of the taxpayers' pockets, but still, they still walked. Hall settled a civil suit against the city and some police staff early this year for $5 million. Jurors did not hear about the civil suit during the trial. Hall told jurors last week that he had a hole in his lip and pain in his head, jaw, back, and neck after the attack. He lost 20 pounds because he couldn't eat solid food for weeks. And a ruptured gallbladder later led to chronic pancreatitis. Damn. He also had spinal surgery with 2 damaged discs in his neck, replaced by titanium and a cadaver bone, excuse me. Yeah, they wrecked him. They wrecked him. It reminds me so much of Rodney King. It really does. And like I said, none of what happened to this man even remotely surprises me. None of it. Because this is who they are. This is, and has always been, and until this thing flips on its head, will always be how America is. And not only did they beat this man, but this guy has now what seems to be life-altering effects done to his physicality. Like they said, he had to get spinal surgery. They could have ruined this man's ability to walk again just based on hearing that. They messed up with his gallbladder. Like they crippled him damn near. Because all we see is what's on his face and his elbow. We didn't see what's going on internally. Of course, we can't see that. But they beat him like they wanted to kill him. They did all of that and everything else under the sun and everywhere in between and still walked. And can possibly, if they so choose, go back to the same job that allowed them to walk away from this and allowed them to get away with beating this man. So like I said, to the black people who are cops out there, if you are undercover and something like, just keep in mind that this could happen to you. If this could happen to this man, anything can happen to you. There is no protection for you. Under or behind that blue wall of silence. There is no protection for you there. And this story right here proves just that. Y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. If you have not done so already, make sure that you text the number that is pinned down in the comments below so you can receive notifications every time I upload a new video.